Welcome to the show, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. Today I have with me Jared from Digibyte. Jared, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Now, Digibyte's one of those cool projects that has been around for ages, but for anybody who hasn't heard about you yet, maybe some of the people who are new to the crypto scene, give us the elevator pitch. What are you guys doing?
The quickest introduction that I can make to people is Digibyte is almost a 5-year-old blockchain that is currently the world's longest, fastest, and most secure UTXO blockchain. So we've pioneered a number of innovations that are now being used in dozens of other blockchains. And, we are a huge believer in this technology and the opportunity it has for all humankind.
Nice. I like it. So you guys are doing some heavy lifting and other projects are coming by and stealing some of your ideas?
Well, I wouldn't really say that they're stealing them. I mean, it is open source after all. And the reality is there's components of Digibyte that are brought in from Bitcoin or other open source cryptographic libraries. So, that's kind of the beauty of this technology is we all have the ability to continue building on each other's stacks. And we can do that in a much more efficient, progressive manner than would be possible if we kept it closed and proprietary.
That's why I love open source. It just, everybody's winning. You can take ideas from other people and, utilize those, build on top of them, make them better. Other people can see what you're doing and make them better too. And everybody wins at the end of the day, which I think is a fantastic thing. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
You're promising very high security. You're more secure than Bitcoin.
Well, so here is where, I really feel that people need to define the terms that they're using. So to me, when I think of a blockchain and I think of security, I absolutely think decentralization and the decentralization of mining. So as I think most people know, when it comes to Bitcoin or when it comes to any blockchain in general, the difference between a blockchain is it's a decentralized system. So the comparison I like to make to people that may be new to this space is why is decentralization important? Well, all we have to do is look to nature, look around us, look at our own DNA. How do we survive as a species? We make exact replicas of our own DNA, and we put that out there in, various and assorted ways. Look at the animal kingdom, look at the plant kingdom, like mushroom spores. So this idea of making an exact replica of a record and then spreading it and duplicating it as many times as possible, that's fundamentally what a blockchain is. So to make the most secure blockchain possible, you need to make sure that record of that blockchain is as widely distributed as possible. So that's where with Digibyte, since last year, we've had over 210,000 full nodes installed. So, and part of that is for numerous reasons. Our block speed is 40 times faster than what Bitcoin is right now. But we also have 5 independent mining algorithms. So that helps to further the decentralization. But I guess the one takeaway for anybody that's watching that is the point we try and get across is we do believe that there should be more than one blockchain. We don't believe in a winner takes all environment because there's a lot of awesome innovation going out there. But if it's a blockchain, it should actually be decentralized. It shouldn't be, 7 servers controlled by a central company. That's no different than a clustered database.
We do see some of the top projects with a worrying amount of centralization, even though they're decentralized, they're centralized, decentralized projects. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. But I want to explore the idea a little bit more behind the multi-algorithm mining, because this is really interesting to me. So you're essentially broken up between 20% approximately on each for 5 different mining algorithms. What's the whole concept behind doing that? Because a lot of these are GPU. I mean, you've got SHA-256. Can you tell us about the different mining algorithms? What the mining algorithms use to mine with, and why those particular mining algorithms out of the other mining algorithms that you didn't use?
Well, so the idea is, and this is kind of the case right now, you could literally take all the Bitcoin mining power in the world and throw it at Digibyte, and you would only be able to get 20% of the blocks that are on the Digibyte network. And that's because each algorithm on Digibyte with 5 attributes to 20%. And what happens is if all of a sudden there's a massive hash rate increase, or the amount of computers mining dramatically increases, the Digibyte difficulty system will adjust in real time, and it will still keep everything else on an even playing field. So the other 4 algorithms literally could counteract all the Bitcoin mining power in the world. So the initial idea is that with 5 mining algorithms, you could always have 2 that are used for ASICs, which we do have now, Script and SHA-256, because there is a huge market for used ASICs out there. Mm-hmm. And then also keeping 2 for GPU and then 1 for CPU. The CPU one seems to have been a little bit more difficult because you end up having to counter botnets. So, one of the things we're looking at, we're planning an upcoming hard fork. We're going to swap some of these mining algorithms out.
Oh, interesting.
And another reason for having multiple mining algorithms is it's actually easier to make changes to the network, because let's say if you remove one, you just have to have the other 4 that agree on it, and you still have that stability, so you don't have a massive disruption like what would happen with a single algorithm blockchain such as Litecoin or Bitcoin. The idea is, I started out in 2012 as a Bitcoin miner, just with my desktop gaming CPU, and it was pretty awesome just being able to mine, some Bitcoins here and there. And then within about 2 weeks, when the first ASICs hit the market, I went from being able to mine almost a Bitcoin a day to I calculated within 2 weeks after the first, I think it was Avalon ASICs hit, it would take me 6,000 days to mine a single Bitcoin. And that's just how fast. That's in a 2-week time span. So
that's crazy. Well, I think it really gives a good point to why you're going multi-algorithm, because you're still giving people who are running GPUs a chance. And of course the CPU mining as well. That's very interesting too. And because the ASICs really have this way of just chewing up a blockchain. And we saw what happened with Dash, where all these miners came out and just crushed mining overnight almost. And, profitability just went totally down for Dash miners. And so I think it's really great that you're looking at this multiple algorithm situation where you can actually use your old Bitcoin miners to mine Digibyte, which is great.
Yeah, and it goes back to the original purpose why Digibyte was created. So, one of the things we like to lead with is, we truly believe that this technology can fix 95% of the cybersecurity vulnerabilities out there today, and using a blockchain in ways that aren't even really necessarily financially related. In fact, the Genesis block for Digibyte started with the headline, USA Today target 110 million customers' data stolen. So even from the beginning, we were thinking from the security aspects. And once you have this decentralized network, it effectively, the way I like to explain it to people is it's like a cake, and you have 2 layers with a middle layer, almost like a giant Oreo cake. Mm-hmm. And at that base level, you have what is effectively a very advanced decentralized communications protocol. And that's one of the things where, whether it's Digibyte or Bitcoin, a lot of people don't really value that, and that can be leveraged and used in a lot of very interesting ways. And then that second layer is where the digital asset layer comes in, and that's where you have the unit, of a Digibyte, because you have to incentivize the network to operate. You have to incentivize miners, you have to incentivize exchanges, you have to incentivize all these different groups to run the software. And then obviously that is, the market activity, daily trading, etc. But then once you have those 2 things and they're very decentralized, then you can start building some awesome, cool applications on top of that. And that's, where the applications layer comes in.
Nice.
So
we're going to be digging into that a little more in just a moment here. I did want to ask, though, have you thought about bringing in a proof of stake?
So I have yet to see true proof that it can be fully secured. I still believe proof of work is the most secure system out there. And in fact, Ethereum, they've been talking about their proof of stake system for 4 years now, and they're still running proof of work, right? And then their proposal was, well, we'll take every 100th block and make it proof of stake out of 99. So I don't think we're getting away from that anytime soon. There was one idea that we kind of came up with that I thought was really entertaining that we've been kicking around. And this is the idea of what if we took one of Digibyte's 5 mining algorithms and converted it to proof of stake? So you still have 4 different mining algorithms and a real-time difficulty system, basically securing the network. And then at the same time, you could take that other 20% and you could, then that could be distributed to stakeholders or stakers. So that's an interesting idea because you kind of get the best of all worlds in that regard. So, that is something we've looked into. But the biggest thing is, like we said, we're going on like pushing 7 million blocks on the Digibyte blockchain. So, you've got 5 years of history there. I think our market cap is, around 400, 500 million right now. So if you start talking about making drastic changes to a network like that, there's just a lot of things that you really have to be careful with. With Digibyte, we've carried out over 4 successful hard forks over the past 4.5 years. And I can tell you that is one of the most stressful things you can do as a developer. And that's when our network was a lot smaller. But we've also learned a lot in the process, and we've seen a lot of other projects that have ran into issues and caused massive failures. So anything we do, we definitely approach with caution, and we test it and we make sure it works before we ever release it. So but yeah, at this point in time, I think a multi-algo proof of work is the best solution in terms of securing a blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with proof of work, is that it is provenly secure, and it has been provenly secure for quite a few years now, and it's where security's at currently. Proof of stake models are being developed that are trying to be more secure. I know Cardano's recently come out with a white paper on a more secure proof of stake, but the proof will be in the pudding. So we actually have to see that being secure and being run securely for years before we can say, okay, that's definitive now. Now, speaking of some of the other projects, you guys have been around for about 5 years now, but then we have these projects that are kind of coming in. Some of them are still in ICO, EOS, and what's, I guess, the difficulty in getting your message across when we see something like EOS, which is still in an ICO phase and it's worth $17 billion and it's getting all this hype? So how do you kind of try to rise above the noise?
What I've told a lot of our awesome community members is, we just keep working hard, building real technology that works, and it'll come. The most effective form of advertising out there is when somebody comes to you and says, hey, look at this, like word of mouth through friends, So we get a lot of criticism for not having a massive marketing budget to go out and promote. But to me, that's all hype. It's not sustainable. It's not long lasting. So you take projects like EOS, it's turning out exactly like I thought it would. I mean, it's the same thing Dan Larimer did with BitShares, and then he did with Steemit, and then now he's running it with EOS. It'll run on 21 centralized servers. They remove a lot of the validation to get their signature validation to get their graphene engine supposedly doing 100,000 transactions per second. That would never fly in a truly decentralized network. So it's a lot of hype. Obviously those guys have all made a lot of money, but people still seem to be buying into it. So, do I think there's hybrid approaches? Sure. But there's a lot of this, let's call it a blockchain, even though it's, basically a clustered database that, essentially controlled, right? Sure, let's call it a blockchain. That's what people do, and they make money at it, and then they just, but it's just, instead of, one of the things I think those that are listening, the same group that's behind EOS was behind Steemit, was behind BitShares, right? We could have done that with Digibyte, right? We could have went off and launched 3 or 4 or more different versions and called it different things with Digibyte, but we didn't. Instead, we upgraded and improved the same network. So you have a track record with Digibyte of over 4.5 years of steady, solid improvements, making it better and better and better and better over time. If we were to take the code that's in Digibyte right now and basically reset it or relaunch it with a brand new blockchain, it would be thousands of times more efficient from a number of different ways than the original client that was there in 2014. So, that's kind of our philosophy, is let's keep building this, improving this. If we got to swap algorithms, if we got to swap, say from SHA-256 to SHA-512 after the NSA memorandum came out, like in 2016, or if we have to switch to a quantum proof algorithm, like over the next 20 years, we can keep doing that, with Digibyte as time goes on. So
I love the focus on flexibility and decentralization, because there will always be miners coming to those different algorithms, and if you can keep ahead of the curve and it's easy to do and you've built that in to be able to do it, that's really cool. I really like that. Now, currently you guys are rocking around 560 transactions per second. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's currently should be around there.
That's a pretty good number. That's a pretty good number. I mean, compared to Bitcoin, which is, painfully slow, but of course we still use it. Ethereum, very slow at the moment as too. Those guys are working on off-chain scaling solutions. A lot of talk about sharding as well. I know Nem Catapult has just come out there at 4K transactions. So is there any plans moving forward for Digibyte to do off-chain scaling, or are you looking around going, ooh, those guys are a lot faster than we are?
Well, so, when we did our last, well, not the last, that was before Segwit, but our DigiSpeed hard fork, and we doubled the block timing to 15 seconds, and we introduced code in there that would double the size of the blocks every 2 years, right? So in this coming hard fork we're going to do some updates to that, and the idea is to make sure that the blockchain doubles every 2 years so we can keep handling that transaction capability, right? So, one of the things when I got invited to speak at MIT and Harvard, one of the things I said there was, there is no single blockchain that's going to scale to handle every single piece of data and information in the world. It's just not going to happen, right? And not every single piece of data needs to be embedded and recorded and distributed across everybody's computer that's running a node, right? It doesn't make sense. So, an OP return, which is how we can do things like smart contracts, multi-sig. That's how we're securing documents with like the DigiSign platform for international trade. That's how we're doing various and assorted different things. It's limited to 80 bytes of data in a transaction, right? And that limit is important because you really only need to be putting important data in there. You don't want to just kind of waste it with a bunch of random things. So I believe that the best approach to the scaling problem is to have as scalable as possible of a main chain, which is what we've tried to engineer Digibyte to be, right? To be that backbone for all sorts of different applications. And then once you have that solid decentralized worldwide network, it makes a lot of sense to start anchoring in and tying in side blockchains or private blockchains into a public chain. So, there's this movement towards, centralized private chains. Well, I've been brought in to consult with a number of companies, and they're like, well, we want to put it on a blockchain. And I'm like, okay, cool. How are you going to secure it? And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's on a blockchain. I'm like, well, a blockchain's secured because it's decentralized and has this thing known as proof of work mining, right? And so my advice to them is, take what you're trying to do and just anchor it in and use the security of a public chain, and you can still maintain all the privacy and everything you want, but you have the benefit. So I think that line of thinking is starting to come along a little bit more. But you still see a lot of major legacy corporations are still not publicly embracing blockchain technology. Or if they do it, they're doing it in a completely centralized, really, in my opinion, non-blockchain way, and then advertising it and calling it a blockchain. So
it's pretty easy to throw the name blockchain out there, and we've seen actually a lot of traditional companies doing this recently. Kodak coming out and saying, well, we're going to do blockchain, and their stock price shoots up, and people just get excited about it because there's that hype around just throwing the word out there at the moment. But I agree with you. Interoperability is absolutely going to be key, as far as there's going to be so many blockchains out there for different uses, for different companies. If you try to put everything on one blockchain, it creates a giant bottleneck anyway. So why would you want to do that?
Yeah. No, and and that's why I'm a huge fan of this idea of cross-chain transactions, atomic swaps, a lot of that other stuff. And going back to that point I made earlier, I truly feel heading to a decentralized internet with blockchain technology is a much closer form to nature and how nature works today. I mean, you just look at any plant species or a lot of animal species, and just how life itself is passed on. I think is just the perfect way to make the comparison for blockchain technology.
Nice. I like the comparisons. Very interesting. Let's dive into a few more of the features of Digibyte. So we have, of course, a DApp platform, smart contracts, digital assets, DigiID, DigiShield, DigiSign, all these exciting things. But let's start off with the DApp platform. What kind of DApps have been built or are planning on being built on Digibyte?
So, when people talk about the term DApp, right, I think it's important to define specifically what you're looking at, right? And when you talk about a decentralized application, a lot of the dApps that you're seeing being advertised as dApps, I don't feel are truly decentralized dApps, because the model that you currently tend to have is you'll have some company that'll go raise money, they'll have a CEO, CTO, etc. And even though they're building their infrastructure stack on top of something that's supposedly decentralized, a lot of times it's truly not. So in terms of dApps on top of Digibyte, I think it's important to clarify with people that a lot of times we're talking about existing, kind of products that are merging in blockchain technology. So to me, when I hear the term decentralized application, I believe in a truly, truly, truly decentralized app that doesn't have a company or a CTO or anything like that. And I still think we're a ways away from that. I mean, there needs to be a fair amount of infrastructure built up around this. So our approach in the intermediate time, is taking something like what we did with DigiSign, which is still a for-profit company, but integrating parts of the public blockchain, the Digibyte blockchain, and showing how it can be used. And the idea is to get in as much of an ecosystem as possible built around it with multiple different parties using it for different assorted reasons, whether it's an exchange, whether it's a document system, whether it's, et cetera. So we have been developing a system, and we've actually tested this out, that would allow people to issue digital assets on top of the Digibyte blockchain. Similar in function to how it's actually done with like Tethered. Tether's actually an asset that's issued on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. Most people don't know that. And there was a handful. Now, the problem why that approach to smart contracts and digital assets being issued on top of Bitcoin, the reason it never took off is because the Bitcoin blockchain has been full for the last 2 or 3 years. But all the technology's been there. And there's been actually quite a bit of work over the last 4 years to build smart contract-like systems on top of Bitcoin. And so one of the things we've done is gone out and said, hey, to the people who are building this technology, why don't you come do it on Digibyte? Like, we got a lot more room, we got a lot more scalability, and you can do some of these things. So, and that's the beauty, is there is enough interoperability and functionality between Digibyte and Bitcoin that you don't have between Ethereum and Bitcoin. So we can, fill that role and fill that gap. So you're going to be seeing more of this happening. And, at the same time, we are working on building better developer tools. That's one thing I will give Ethereum credit for, is they had much better developer tools and documentation and system. And, had we gone out and done an ICO in 2014 and, raised $20-30 million, we probably could have had a lot more of that by now. But as you know, Digibyte was not an ICO, and we never had a large war chest of funding. So it's been a truly community-driven effort and volunteer basis, which has been amazing. And, that is why I believe it's just so much stronger without all the hype, because, it's been a true grassroots community-driven movement. And that's just only getting more powerful with time. So,
yeah, the grassroots aspect is really great, and I really like that, but it does make funding yourself tricky. This is the thing with EOS. They've now got $1 billion+ war chest that they can just throw money around and buy all kinds of assets and pay for all kinds of things, and that money, of course, makes it really easy. And so, have you thought about implementing some sort of a DAO or war chest where you could, 10% of the block reward would go to, the Digi Foundation, and you guys be able to fund your developers and things that way?
We have talked about that. We have been tossing that idea around. And it's something that I personally have thought long and hard on. And the conclusion I came to was I would be fundamentally opposed to any sort of automatic distribution like that. And for one simple reason, and that is security and integrity of the blockchain itself. Because if you start diverting 10% of all incoming funds to something like a Digibyte Foundation that's supposed to be nonprofit to help promote the network, it becomes a target. It becomes a target for malicious hackers. It becomes a target for governments. It becomes a target for a number of different things. So instead of doing that, the approach that I'm advocating and pushing towards, and by the way, just because I'm advocating this doesn't mean that it won't happen. I mean, if enough people get together and decide they want to hard fork Digibyte, and I can't stop it. Like,
that's the decentralized nature of the thing.
That's the decentralized nature of it, right? But I would advocate this, and that's what I call the triangle approach, right? You've got the blockchain, which will always be independent, decentralized, and completely transparent. And then you have, what we're doing with the foundation, which, people can donate to, they can contribute to, but it's not the body or the group that controls it, right? It's there to pick up the slack, to support it, but it's not the governing or controlling body in any way of what's actually happening. And then the third piece is where you have the commercial sector, where you have startups and for-profit entities and companies, which there's several already that are profiting on a daily basis, whether it's exchanges, whether it's some other service providers or companies like DigiSign. And there's several in the works. Some of them I can't talk about because I'm under an NDA from advising them. It's really exciting stuff. And that commercial aspect, I believe this model has been proven and shown to work, because you see this with the Linux Foundation. You have the Linux Foundation, help support. It's completely volunteer based. It's completely community driven. Then you have commercial entities like Linux, and then you have the actual Linux kernel, which is completely open source. So, and they've been around for what? We're going on 30, 40 years now.
They're doing okay.
So, yeah, exactly. So that model, I think, is is really, and it's even been proven with Bitcoin. A lot of people gave the Bitcoin Foundation a lot of flack, but it did play an important role early on. I had the pleasure of meeting Patrick, who was the counsel for the Bitcoin Foundation. I was on a panel with him at Harvard, and he's the guy that actually separated the developers from the foundation back in like 2014. And he got them under MIT to help MIT fund development and kind of split that out. But it was interesting, kind of hearing his story about this problem, But then we have Bitcoin. And what if Bitcoin would have hard forked back in 2014 or 2015, and 10% of all the Bitcoins in the world were going to the foundation that's being ran out of Washington, D.C.? I don't think Bitcoin would have caught on like it's caught on.
That's right. There would have been some form of centralization, and people go, but who are these people? And there would always be talking about the foundation, who's running it, the personalities behind it.
Right. And even though we've got a lot of awesome volunteers with the Digibyte Foundation, we've already had some internal drama, as any organization would. So,
of course.
That's why I don't think we should ever do that. I think we should always keep the network pure, decentralized, and just on its own. And I know that there's enough passionate, talented, motivated individuals out there that'll continue making improvements to it over time, in an open source fashion. So, in a way, it is kind of the biggest DApp in its own right. That is the original DApp. So that's kind of the take there.
Nice. Now I want to break down a few of the separate little projects you got going here. So let's say for example, can you just tell us, like, what does DigiSign actually do? What does DigiID do? What does DigiShield do?
Okay, so first of all, DigiSign is like I said, is a for-profit private company, which I no longer have any ownership stake in as of last fall. But it's still up and running. It's still being used by multiple companies, a lot of which I can't really publicly disclose because I'm still under an NDA. But I can tell you it is being used for sure in international trade. For those that have ever used DocuSign, just imagine DocuSign, but with the Digibyte blockchain and more security and more validation. So they sign a document. They also have an authenticator app that's essentially a wallet, but with private keys, even though we don't call it a wallet and you don't send and receive digibytes from it. But the person that has it on their phone uses that to basically sign the document. Then the document's linked to those keys, so you know who signed it. And then once they sign it, it's encrypted or it's hashed, put in the blockchain. So there's no disputes. There's no disputes in who signed what. And especially in international trade, when you've got multiple languages, it's going back and forth. It's completely transparent. Everybody knows what's going on. And the blockchain makes that possible because you don't have to have a third-party intermediary or escrow or notary anymore. Right? It's like it can be used to settle a lot of things. So that was just kind of like the first thing. That's what we demoed last summer before Citibank and a lot of big corporations, just to prove and say, hey, you can use blockchain technology for stuff other than payments. Because the one thing I've learned, at this point over the last 5 years, I've talked to almost every major Fortune 500 company out there, a lot of times in private, and the one thing that they would always come at me with is like, well, we don't want to be associated with this publicly because somebody could use this for, drugs or money laundering or terrorist financing. That's the same thing over and over and over. And they don't want to risk or jeopardize their brand. So, I know
the irony, of course, is that they all accept fiat.
Right. Right. But the one thing I found is if I can approach them and when I talk to them and sit down with them, whether it's a compliance officer for a law firm, compliance officer for a bank, or regulators or whoever, and I'm like, how do you feel about your data after the Equifax breach? Or how do you feel about the fact that Facebook is selling all your private conversations? How do you feel about the fact that if Google wanted to, they could get all your search browser history? Like they're tracking it, they're recording it, right? And if you go with that aspect of, hey, this blockchain technology can be used to secure your own personal data, because I believe that the ultimate place where this technology is going to be used is when I can go visit a website. And when I visit that website, my own data is secured by my own set of private keys. And if I want to allow an advertisement, I get paid directly in minute amount of Digibyte or whatever, assets used at that point. It becomes widely adopted, and I get rewarded directly. There is no need for these third-party centralized data hubs. So, taking that approach really is very powerful. So, I guess I got a little sidetracked there.
That's all right. That's good stuff. That's good. That's great.
and this ties back into what we're calling DigiID. So, when you look at a blockchain like Bitcoin or Digibyte, there's about 15 different ways that cryptography is interwoven, and there's different subsystems. And I know a lot of people just like to talk about blockchain. Well, what makes a blockchain actually work? You have all these different subcomponents and subsystems. And some of these subcomponents and subsystems are very, very, very underutilized. And because of the way that they work in a cryptographic fashion, you could do a lot of very exciting things with them. So Dr. Merkle, who the Merkle tree is named after, first created public and private key as well as the Merkle data structure, I think in 1969 for his Stanford PhD and thesis, right? Well, in a recent interview, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's on YouTube, he gave not too long ago, he talked about the fundamental problem with public and private key cryptography for the last few years, the last 30 years. And what he claimed is blockchain is the solution to the distribution of these public and private keys in a decentralized, trustless manner that he hasn't been able to solve. And then if you combine that aspect, it can revolutionize, the entire architecture of the internet as we know it. So, the problem is we have such a reliance, and most people may not know this, but like when you go to your bank or you go to Twitter, there's that little lock icon up there. Well, that's what's known as like an SSL certificate, right? But who actually issues that SSL certificate? Well, most people might know that functionality, it functionally works the same way as your wallet keys do. So instead of relying on some third party, because when you buy a new Apple or when you buy a new Windows computer, it comes with like 20 or 30 pre-installed root certificates that the government's approved. And this changes from country to country. And this is also how countries use to attack each other in cyberland. Well, if you eliminate the dependence on that centralization of root certificate authorities and just basically use everyone's blockchain's keys, you could fundamentally make the internet 1,000 times more secure almost overnight. Because instead of compromising one server or one set of keys and one distributor, and this is why, botnet attacks, and DDoS attacks are so prevalent, right? If you go and you hack a webcam and that webcam's using the same root certificate that the other 200,000 webcams are that were produced, you just got to compromise it once. Whereas if every single one is running its own blockchain wallet keys, so that's the other thing that we're kind of working towards, is like, if we can take all these IoT devices, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's a webcam, whether it's your Xbox, and it can all be linked to a set of blockchain keys that are independent and unique, you can make everything far more secure.
Yeah.
So the idea with DigiID is to demonstrate to people that you can use your wallet keys for more than just simply sending and receiving. You could use it to authenticate and log into a forum or a website. And it's done in a secure way because you can prove and establish it's a real person. So this can be used in the advertising industry to prevent click spam. If you know that you're dealing with a real individual, and it really takes a combination of three things. You have to have the physical hardware. Like you have to have the hardware integrated with the blockchain. And then essentially what becomes a two-factor device. But once you have that, you can eliminate a lot of the stuff, the nefarious stuff that's happening on the internet.
That's awesome, because I've been reading so much about this recently, and I keep finding these different projects which are touching on this exact topic. And I think a lot of people, don't realize the seriousness of the issues that are going on right now. The internet system that we're using is largely broken. The ID systems that we're using are largely broken. The data systems are broken, and we need a solution, but there's not really the solutions being made in the sort of the mainstream areas. Blockchain, of course, is offering that, and the adoption of blockchain technology in all these spaces is so critical.
Yeah, what I tell people, and I'm working on writing a book, calling it Blockchain 2035, because the year 2035 is also going to be the year that the last Digibyte's minted. But more importantly, I get asked all the time all these questions, so I'm trying to formulate it and break it down and present it in a way that people can see how blockchain will actually be used and implemented in their everyday lives by the year 2035. And the merger that I see being the home run is the merger of the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchain technology. So, one of the problems that a lot of these AI researchers and developers are having is you can take an AI engine and point it at a bunch of data, but what if that data is garbled? What if it's not accurate? What if it's not authentic? That completely eliminates the effectiveness of the AI in a lot of cases. So if you have systems where you have sensors or devices, you can use blockchain technology to authenticate and to prove, that they are who they say they are, and that they are indeed a real entity that gives data. And then effectively artificial intelligence uses blockchain as a rails to vet and verify and analyze data, right? So you merge those three together, and without a doubt, that's definitely where this is all moving. So I like to say that blockchain will be the rails that AI runs on.
Nice. So many exciting things going on over at Digibyte. It's definitely, I always love getting to talk to people like you, because, you're in it, you're living it, and you get it. You see where the internet's going, you see where technology's going, and that is really, really cool. I want to flip, we got a couple more questions here for you before we finish up for the day. How can Digibyte be a social good? How can Digibyte act to help people, in like Venezuela, for example? What are some ways that you can have a positive social impact using the Digibyte blockchain?
I think that the Digibyte blockchain, without a doubt, can be used for a tremendous amount of good. And you take places like Venezuela, sub-Saharan Africa, even other places throughout South America, those are the people that actually need this technology the most. But one of the things that I found amazing in the different travels and events and places I went to, a lot of times those people are the most receptive to this technology, but a lot of times they don't necessarily know exactly how or directly have access. And so, getting out there, and if you're in one of these places and actually just start talking to people, whether you talk to two people, whether you talk to three people, you talk to one person. I had a good friend who always talks about the rule of five. He's like, if you can just do and inform and talk to five people, and those five people can go out and talk to five more people, within just a short amount of time, you can almost reach, if the message is valid enough and good enough, you can almost reach everybody on the planet. So, how can it be used? It can be used in a number of ways. Remittance. As much as, the banks are fighting this technology, it really does make sense to use something like Digibyte for international remittance and payments. Like if we go to pay a developer that's in Australia, we can send him a payment. It's there in a few seconds. He's able to turn around within 30 seconds, within 2 minutes, and then send that payment on to somebody else he needs, basically for a fraction of a cent. So why should Western Union be taking 30%, from people that are sending remittance back home to pay for family? Because they often are the most impoverished, people in our society. When I lived in Hong Kong, every Sunday I would walk down the street and there would be a line of a few hundred Filipino housemaids trying to send money from Western Union back to their families. A lot of times they had children, elderly parents, etc. And they weren't sending much at all, but Western Union was still taking 20, 30, 40% of everything they were sending. So reaching
preying
out
on the weakest people in society.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens in the United States. That happens in other places. So those are the people that need this technology the most. Yet a lot of times they're the ones that can't afford to get into it, or don't know how to open up a trading account, or all that other stuff. So one of the things that I've tried to do as a developer is make systems easier to use, because let's face it, I'm sure we've all had the experience of teaching somebody that we know, whether it's a friend or a family member, how to use a crypto wallet for the first time. And when Digibyte started, back in 2014, I think after a few months, our market cap was like $80,000. And at the time, I was mining a bunch of Digibytes. I still had a bunch of GPU rigs in my garage going. And a lot of what I would mine, I would just give to people. So when I would go to conferences, where I go to events or friends and family, and pretty much every friend or family member that I had from back then has lost them because they didn't secure them. They didn't know what it was.
No.
And I know that's a pretty common story when I've talked to other industry veterans, that did the same thing with Bitcoin back in 2012, 2013. And the systems have gotten better. The wallets we have today are significantly better than they were 4 years ago. But I still think we have a long ways to come in simplifying it and helping it to where the ultimate goal, or the ultimate solution, I think here is to have a system where people use an easy to use app. They don't really know it's a blockchain. They don't know what it is. They know the terms associated in there, but they don't really know how it works. It's similar to like your internet browser today, right? How many people actually know how HTTP works, or SSL certificates, or a bunch of this other stuff? So, one of the things and the criticism that I've taken is a lot of times I've been told in meetings, I get too technical, and I get excited. And I guess that's just, my nature as a technical person. But, bringing in new developers, new ideas, and new ways to simplify this technology. One of the ideas I've been playing around with for a while is you can actually take private keys, and you can actually embed them in an image, right? Well, what if you had a wallet that was like, instead of typing in the amount, X amount, you just took a picture of an object, and there was a QR code or whatever it is, and all you did was send that picture of that image, and that was the payment. So not only do you have a record of exactly what you purchased or exactly what was that spent on, so that could help transform auditing, records keeping, etc. But it was just simple and easy to use in its most basic format. So
that's as user friendly as possible. This is one thing. A lot of people out there, and for people listening, we're kind of already on the inside niche of technology and the markets and all these different things. But think about all the people out there who all they know how to do is to turn on the box and click like on Facebook, and that's it. That's it, guys. They don't do much more than that on their computers, and that needs to be super easy to use. User friendliness, of course, is absolute key. One quick question for you too. Do you think that you could use the Digibyte blockchain for things like land registry? I know we were talking about sort of social good and social impact a minute ago. Would that be a potential use case for it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm actually myself working on a real estate project as we speak. That's about all I can say on that.
Oh, all right. Well, we're gonna want more info about that when you have it. That's cool. That's really.
But
really
cool.
No,
very much so. I mean, any sort of. That's the thing. If I had a nickel for every exciting conversation I'd had with somebody somewhere, I'd love to share it a lot of times. But then I realized, like, if you put something like out there, then the hype machine gets going, and then it's just, not until the time's right. But yeah, very much so. You could do land registry, all sorts of stuff. I mean, you name it. Like, from aviation to healthcare records to land titles to vehicle titles. All very much possible.
That's it. And again, it's one of those situations where people, in the United States, New Zealand, you're like, whatever. I trust my government to do my land registry. That's fine. But of course, people in Peru, for example, it's a very different situation. Blockchain technology can really help them.
You know that even in the United States, title fraud is actually a really big problem.
I'm surprised.
And when you go to buy a house and you do a mortgage origination, by law, in a lot of places, you're required to do a title search, right? Which is a very slow, archaic, inefficient system because there's no better way to do it. So absolutely, for title, it's a huge thing. But it really boils down to the technology's here today. Maybe there's not the best digital workflow, but the components are all there to make it. Same with healthcare records. It's just the bureaucratic systems.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing that I've started learning as I go and I talk and present and meet with different industry groups is there's this fundamental human reaction to change that is kind of like why we survive, and that's self-preservation. So when you go into a group and you tell them that they're going to be massively disrupted and that a lot of the people that work in that industry can be replaced, people start resisting that. People start fighting against that.
Of course they do.
And then when you start talking to people that are in an industry and you're like, well, your entire industry can be, rendered obsolete by this technology, they're going to fight back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their self-preservation kicks in. I mean, just look at the stories when Henry Ford made the first cars in America, and the horse and buggy drivers would literally, they'd see a car and they'd attack it. They would destroy it. This happened hundreds and thousands of cases across America for, a couple decades.
That's crazy. But it happens. This is the thing. People are resistant to change. And this is the important thing about change is that change is going to happen no matter whether you want it to or not. And you can be part of that change and benefit from being part of that change, or you can resist it and get crushed by it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my stance on it. Like, I want to be at the forefront and, help pave the way, and not, yeah.
All right. Final question for you, Jared. What's next for Digibyte? What can we expect from you guys in the next 6 months to a year?
Well, there's a lot of things underway. I mean, like you said earlier, the Digibyte community has an amazing group. Like, it's just every day there's more and more people coming. Every day I'm hearing and learning about something or some initiative that somebody just took on. And that's the beauty of it. Like, nobody needs my permission. Nobody needs anybody's permission to go out there and build something with Digibyte. And that's what I want to encourage people to do is, if you have an idea, go for it, run with it, do it, So, obviously, like I said, we're planning a hard fork coming on later this year to swap some mining algorithms, do some improvements, do a few other things. But the biggest and most important thing for 2018 is the vision and the idea that we can build an ecosystem of different companies with specific applications that are built on top of Digibyte and using different aspects of the blockchain, whether it's payments, whether it's identity management, whether it's cybersecurity. So that's the biggest thing. And it's just one of those things We've learned this over the years. It's better to just keep your head down and keep working, and then when it's ready, release it, than to go out there and just start spinning up a bunch of hype before it's ready. Because it's just one of the things that's kept us around, and we've literally seen hundreds of blockchains and projects and companies come and fail and go since we started. Like if you were to go back and you were to look at CoinMarketCap in the spring of 2014, I guarantee you wouldn't recognize over half the names of the blockchains that were above us. You go to 2015, do the same thing. 2016, do the same thing. It'll be the same thing. But the one thing that's been consistent, there's been a handful of players that have been around and have been here. So some of the things that we've learned that have taken us this far, we're just going to continue doing and continue growing and letting the technology speak for itself.
Nice. And that's the way to do it. Let the tech speak for itself, and people will respond to that. And of course, the community has responded to that. The 200K plus nodes is an impressive feat without a doubt. So it's really a very interesting project. Jared, thanks for taking the time to talk to the community. I know that a lot of people have been, chasing us around for a while to say, you got to talk to the guys at Digibyte. And so it's really great to get to talk to you. It's so much interesting going on, and it's really great to hear your points of view on technology and the world and how all this space is developing, and of course, what is going on over at Digibyte. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.